Hey everybody, today's episode 37 of Real Talk. That's real talk for real estate investors. My name is Chris Anino. I'm here joined today with Mark Woodring. He's the Director of Investments here at Freedom Real Estate Family of Companies. Today we're talking about maximizing your portfolio. If you heard our vlog, we're going to kind of dive into the nitty gritty of four main topics. Diversifying your portfolio, different strategies you can take advantage of in real estate investing, tax advantages in real estate investing, and hiring property management. So I think the biggest part of this conversation, Mark, and I'm sure you agree, is diversification.
Yeah, absolutely. Having, multiple different asset classes that you have, so I know that sometimes when you're talking to investors, they're like, well, what do you think I should do?
Right.
And so, definitely that's a good question because you want to have a strategy.
Right.
You don't want to just, either do what everybody else is doing. I mean, you have to build out your portfolio for what works for you.
Absolutely.
And I know that on some of our different vlogs that we've talked about, the difference between single family home versus multi, and, I'm sure we'll jump into like scaling and all those kind of things as well. But
yeah, actually, that's a conversation I have a lot with our owners, with our clients. That it's not so much a conversation of, hey, I have this money, what do I do with it? It's more of a, hey, look, I'm interested in this property. This is the asset class that I'm looking at. Is this area going to do what I want it to do? This is my goal, right? We talk about. I talk about 5, 10, and 15-year goals with the clients.
Sure.
That way, we can try to maximize their moves, right, and what they buy and how they approach that. So diversification isn't just, buying mutual funds and stocks versus real estate. We're talking about like when you buy real estate.
Yep.
Are you buying single family homes in high market areas? Are you buying single family homes in, C class areas?
Right.
Where you're just gonna have a longer term tenant at a lower rate and the cap rate performs differently there, and looking at things holistically. And then going further into that, the multifamilies, like is a duplex or a quad more in line with what your portfolio goal is, versus our 8 units and 10 and 15, the bigger multifamily. The one thing that makes us a little bit more involved in that process is we also have different investment strategies where it's 100% passive, where all you do is write a check and sign a note, and all of a sudden you're investing real estate with real returns without actually owning any real estate, which we've talked at lengths in other podcasts about
private
that.
money.
Yeah, but private money lending. I think we have a fund that's going together that I think you and Tiffany kind of touched on a little bit. And then, there's lots of different things you can do there that are definitely helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And it basically boils down to what is your appetite as an investor for risk. Again, we talk about diversifying. So say if you were a stockbroker, you're talking about diversifying your portfolio. Well, it's the same thing in real estate. You don't want to just buy all the same single family properties in a B class neighborhood or a C class. It's, again, it ultimately boils down to like what your risk is or what you would like to do or what you feel comfortable doing. But so imagine an A-class property, right? The market right now, you're a real estate agent. I'm a real estate agent. We're watching real estate just, across the nation, just boom, 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 boom. And, yes, it may cost a little bit more money to purchase one of these homes, but if you were to purchase that and have your bills being covered with a little bit of cash flow, that's not the primary reason for it, but imagine buying a house and gaining 15, 20% equity over 5 years.
Right.
When you're talking about your 5-year plan. And then, of course, like a B-class property, may be a little bit easier to rent, maybe a better tenant. All the things that you obviously as a property manager would know. But, and then a C-class. Again, some people, now we don't dive into D-class properties, but at the end of the day, people need to rent houses there too. Right. So, there's really nothing wrong with it. It's just that, like, to protect our investors, we don't really offer that kind of risk.
Yeah. So I'm glad you touched on that. Like, part of what we do is we try to set expectations for risk management a little bit here. Right. And, as you mentioned, we don't buy, we try to stay away from, the lower class properties, just because, we try to set expectation of like, if you purchase it here, we've already done this work to it, or this is the work we would suggest, and this is what the rent would be. And the realization is the rents are not usually at a comparable market rate for lower class properties, which means that the numbers don't work as smoothly. Obviously, the deal has to work. So you analyze your deal, look at the numbers, you do some projections, have conversations with people like Mark and myself to determine, hey, what would the market rate be if I went retail and sold it, or if I had an investor purchase or renting, and all of those things, right? It changes the dynamic. So one of the things that we do here as well is when we acquire properties in the front end of our business, when we purchase at the Cash for Ohio Houses level, they're not always locked in to what the disposition status is. Like sometimes, like we were just talking a deal, actually walking in the door to the studio today, that it may be turning from a retail sale into a turnkey because it's not fitting the retail market right now, which is something we can't gauge. I mean, we do the best we can, but it shifts and moves all the time. And it's one of those properties that's been on the market for a minute. So we kind of looked at the numbers, we gauged the class and the area and tenant base and what the rent should be. And, we're probably in the next week or so making a decision on that, moving that into a turnkey status where, I'll be able to put a tenant in there. And then now it shifts into a different owner class too. Now it's not a live-in owner, it's an investor owner. So it's nice to have that flexibility. And we encourage our investors to have the same kind of strategy and flexibility of dispositions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've touched on it in other areas of conversation where it's about patience as well. Real estate is definitely a patience game. I know that sometimes you may talk to your stock advisor or something like that, and you start to see the market dip a little bit, and all of a sudden, you want to jump ship, sell. I mean, like in real estate, sometimes you have to weather the storm.
You ride the wave, man.
Exactly, because at the end of the day, I mean, ultimately, you'll pay down your mortgage, like you'll have equity in your house. For our new investors and even our savvy investors, I mean, they know that, the savvy investors know to ride the wave. And the new investors, just trust in the fact that you've done your homework, you've looked at the numbers, you have an asset, that's performing. Maybe it's not performing as well as you wanted to, but at the end of the day, you've put money into it. It will pay off. You just have to be patient with it, and again, I know one of the things I think we're going to touch on as well is like when you're talking about just tax benefits of it. So real estate has huge tax benefits. Tiffany and I talked about this earlier in another vlog episode of all the things that you can write off. You can write off property management. You can write off if you had to make repairs to the house. You can write off like the house itself, the depreciation of it. So there's so many things. And so it's really like real estate is such a fun portfolio to build, and as long as you're patient and understand it takes time. Yeah, I mean, it's a chess game, but it's a chess game that the pieces have been laid out, the moves have been kind of laid out for you, and you can definitely predict 3, 4, 5 moves ahead. Right. You brought up tax strategies, and when you were saying that, I was thinking of liabilities, like going back to risk management, and we can make predictions on quite a few things, but honestly, the market as a whole, the masses as a whole make the determination on how things like this play out. And when you have rental portfolios specifically, like you can't control the risks. We start introducing other stakeholders like residents and their families and their friends that may come by the property. We can't always account for certain damages or certain situations to unfold. And we can set a standard, right? We can set expectations, but ultimately there's risk involved with anything. I mean, there's risk of getting in your car every day and putting your seatbelt and driving to work. Exactly. Right. And it's unfortunate. More risk. But, so there's risk involved with this, but the tax benefits on the back end, the potential equity return on this, outweighs it, right? So if we always encourage you to talk to your tax professionals too. I mean, I can't offer up time with Mark, but I'm more than happy to get on the phone with anybody any day to talk about this stuff.
talk to your tax professionals, and they're going to tell you what you can and can't write off. And even in situations where we've had owners that have had some losses, like we just came out of a tough COVID situation that was difficult not only for us to navigate, but for our owners to accept.
Yeah.
And there were some lost rents. There was some pain. There was some feeling there.
Sure.
And that brings us kind of into our next point of hiring a PM is having a professional that's in your corner.
Right.
So I just watched the Rocky franchise, so I'm going to bring this up.
Oh,
so
there you go. Right.
Some would say that Mick was the best character out of the whole franchise because he was just standing in the corner telling Rocky, "Hey, you got this. You got this. You just swing, step up," and all those things. And that's what the PM does for you. Like we're the people that step in and say, "Hey, I know this is hard. You're going to get knocked down. It's going to hurt. I'm going to set this expectation. This is what we're going to do." Prep you, have that conversation. Hey, talk to your insurance. They can help you recover some losses. Talk to your tax professional. We document this. You might be able to get a write-off. We can help navigate that pain. It's not always easy.
Right.
However, when it is good, right? When punches land and everything's perfect, you have a really nice opportunity here for some passive wealth. Mm-hmm. And I think we all agree we're in this game to be in a passive financial freedom position. And real estate's a key way to do that.
No, absolutely. And I mean, you nailed it. I mean, you are the middleman. There's the investor, there's the property, and then you have your property management. They probably know the tenants. Of course, we know the area, we know the market, so we know, when it gets a little scary. So again, it's I know I keep referring back to that stockbroker or whatever, but I mean, because they may know that stock or they know that particular area of their expertise. And so that's, what the property management, that's what you're paying for is their expertise in that particular field, in that particular market, that rental area, knowing that, yes, there may be some ups, there may be some downs, but just like Mick, you do have to ride it out. You'll eventually, hopefully, come out on the better side of that. But you're right, there is risk. And then, I mean, gosh, this last year I know has been rough for COVID. I've been talking to investors, and they're like, "Should I get in it now? Should I not?" Again, it ultimately comes down to like what your appetite for risk is, but it's a protected risk. It's a calculated risk. I mean, you've thought about it, and so. Yeah,
and in effort to come full circle on this, like if you hold rental real estate, okay, and you want to mitigate some of that risk, we talk about tax advantages. We mentioned several times here. I know you guys have done other podcasts to discuss what those look like. I think Randy even said, "Hey, like this is some stuff you can do from an accountant standpoint," and ultimately, diversifying is a really good way to mitigate some risk and liability because it gives you additional cash resources in something with a different stability to supplement income, to be able to take those punches when things come down the road that may be painful.
No, absolutely. It's an amazing way to think of that. And so it's kind of like why you have to, when you're talking about diversifying your portfolio, sprinkling in some of those things. Like imagine if you had some A-class properties and you had a tremendous amount of equity in those properties. Right. You could do a cash out refi, use that money to mitigate maybe some losses. You could use that to put back into property, which then again, you're writing that off.
Right.
So, I mean, there's just so much magic, but it all starts with the first purchase.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so, you're going to have to at some point jump in, get your feet wet. You get that first property. You don't have to be a millionaire to buy real estate. There's plenty of banking and things out there for just the regular guys like us. Right. And I mean, you're an investor, you know, and so so Chris does investing. I haven't jumped in yet just because I got 3 kids and it costs a lot for daycare. But we're going to be getting into it very soon because again, we know that this is a vehicle you ultimately want to. And we all touch on the passive income. I mean, in 20 years, again, I got to be patient too. In 20 years, I want to own multiple properties with no mortgage, just going out and, in my bathrobe and a cup of coffee to grab my checks. I mean, right? Isn't that's ultimately what we're trying to do is not get out of my underwear in the morning. But, so, I mean, and so you have to do that. You have to have some A's, some B's, some C's. I mean, I'm sure your clients come to you and talk about scaling. Like when is a good time to scale? What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, one of my clients, very, very close to me, actually, he recently doubled his portfolio size in the last like 4 months. And what he did is actually exactly what you're talking about. He had long-term rentals. He didn't quite double it. It was probably 150%, right? So, but he had long-term rentals, and they were performing once the second or third set of lease renewals. So we're talking 2.5 to 3 years in.
Right.
All of them have been renovated in some capacity at standard. All of them at market rate. We're now into 2.5 years roughly of there being tenants in there. He did a mass refinance and just refinanced the whole portfolio.
Right.
Pulled 70 to 80% ARV back out.
Yep.
And for those of you who don't know, ARV is after resale value, which is essentially what the value property appreciates at.
Sure.
And he pumped that money back into a new portfolio. He bought, I think, 5 or 6 single-family homes and a couple duplexes.
Right.
One of which is an emerging market for IPM, so we're kind of going through a learning curve of going into that market. But yeah, I mean, now he's already looking to the future, saying, "Okay, hey, these are all rented now. Let's kind of get through this seasoning of 6 months." Finishing out his he has private lenders on that, so finishing out his private lending terms, and he'll go back and probably refinance them in the spring, early summer, and then probably repeat it again. And now actually he's in a position where he's actually close to retiring from the military. So he's looking at that paycheck like, okay, I'm gonna live on this income now. So now he's having the conversation of diversifying, saying, hey, if I take some of the butter off the top, can I invest in other areas that aren't necessarily, hold real estate rentals and get a little residual, right?
Sure.
And ultimately, that's the goal, is to be in a position where you don't have to be a 9-to-5 landlord, right? You don't have to sit there and answer emails and questions and all those things. You can just be passive, 100%.
No, absolutely. And by having, and I'm sure you've even had clients at this, by having a started portfolio and you've paid down your mortgage and you have equity in these houses, at some point, I think we've had a couple investors where they just dump the property. They just want to sell it on the MLS, take that money, because imagine if I had a house where I originally paid $100,000 for it. So I put my 20 grand into it, and over time I've paid it down. Now I know that I could sell it for, 110, right? So it made a little bit of money, but, and I walked $50,000-$60,000. Well, now I can put $50,000-$60,000 towards, $200,000-$300,000 purchase. And so that's how you start to scale and double that portfolio, or, take that 50 grand and buy 2 properties.
Yeah, you can take that 50 grand. You can either buy a larger portfolio, possibly pull a 1031 while that still exists, or you can dump it into 2 properties. And now you have 50 grand. If you had a down payment of 20 on the one, now you can buy essentially 2.5 down payments again, right?
Exactly.
Or in the effort to be all inclusive, you could private money lend on that and get 8 to 12% depending on who's your recipient. And now that money's tied to real estate through a contract, and you get paid, interest dividends either quarterly or semi-annually or annually. Right. Just checks in the bank, right? And then you're not actually owning property, but you're getting, if you get 10% on 50,000, you're getting $5 grand.
Not a bad way to turn it around,
right?
Exactly. And
why not?
And you could just defer all that interest.
Yeah, you don't have to pay for repairs.
Yeah,
deal with tenants.
Sounds. I like that.
That sounds safe. So there's different strategies. Obviously, I'm an advocate all day for rental real estate. Job security for me.
Right.
But personally, my personal investments, I do passive. I might lend.
Right.
I just give money a small percentage. I know we have people here that do a little bit of both.
Yeah.
And I know one of our groups here, we do the lending side, we do recipient where we take money and we put it into projects. So we do a little bit of everything. And that's when we talk about diversifying. It's not just the asset class, but it's also the strategy.
Oh man, there's 100%. So many. It's so many. You could sit down with you, me, your CPA, your financial advisor.
Call CJ.
Yeah. CJ, you can talk to any one of us and we can help to build a plan for you, go over all the different strategies that you have, like what you have your money in, where you could move it to, but ultimately I think, I've said it before, it's going to come down to your appetite for risk. what makes you sleep easy at night, because again, it's an investment. You know what I mean? So you're gonna be putting a little sweat equity into it, some sleepless nights, but I mean, these are calculated risks, and you just have to kind of decide like which route do you want to go, and ultimately, like you had mentioned, what's your 5-year, your 10-year, your 15,
right?
What's your retirement exit?
Right.
What are you going to do with these properties when you no longer want to be in this business?
Right. I mean, and honestly, you can move on the fly. Like if you sit down with one of us, or even your CPA, or a financial advisor, or whoever your in person is that you trust to give you real estate advice and financial advice, the plan you make today will not be your plan next year. This time, it's going to 100% change.
Yep.
And that's okay. Like I think my plans changed 3 or 4 times at this point. I've only been investing for a couple of years. And it's okay. And most of that, some of that's because the market changes. Some of it's because you inherited some money and now your position's changed. You don't have to do this long-term equity build. You already have some equity.
Yep.
All of those things are factors. But the most important thing is to plan, because failing to do that is failing. So get in, talk to somebody. I mean, our phones are always on, off the hook. So call one of us, call CJ. Bring your CPA in the conversation if you want. I don't think we have any problem having those conversations. The most important thing is have the conversation. Right? Yeah. Talk about it.
Exactly. You can't buy if you don't. Don't try.
Right. You got to try something, right?
Right. So.
All right. Well, I think that's it today.
Yeah, I think we got a lot of that out.
Right. Yeah. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Like I said, it's been fun. It's another day in the podcast of Real Talk.
That's right. Awesome.
Which is Real Talk with real estate investing. We like to end these by saying, invest smart
and live happy.
Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific personal or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions and information on this show are not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss.